Hi, this is Kandice Garcia, Quality Manager in the Department of Radiology at Stanford University, and this is the Radiology Improvement Team Education course. Today's discussion is on organizational design for sustainability. Congratulations! You and your team have made significant improvement. You should be very proud of your work and celebrate your success. But get ready, because now here comes the hard part. How many improvement projects have you been a part of that make an improvement, but when you turn your attention elsewhere, after a while, things go right back to where they were before? This is not only disheartening to you, but it significantly impacts the organization, and that not only does the organization lose the benefit of all the effort, but people become less willing to participate in improvement projects in the future because they realize that the effects are unlikely to be sustained. Well, what are the causes that lead to this problem, and how can we be strategic about our improvement projects to avoid these pitfalls? Well, it is important to understand that organizations tend to be stable, meaning that they are resistant to change. They tend to find a natural equilibrium, and on the whole, this is a good thing. In order for your organization to work reliably, it has to have mechanisms to make sure it continues to be the same organization today as it was yesterday. Otherwise, it would be chaos. However, improvement means change, and if you want your organization to change, you need to recognize that it is naturally resistant to change. So, you need to recognize the elements that cause the organization to be resistant to change and not only overcome those elements in the short run, but take advantage of those elements with your new normal to help make it resistant to reverting back. For example, let's say there was a period of time where your performance hovered around 25%. Then you conducted an improvement project and your performance improved over time. During this time, things were constantly changing, and this was exciting because you were constantly reaching new levels of performance. You eventually reached a point when your performance plateaued at a much higher level, around 97%. You decide that is an adequate level of reliability that you need, and now your improvement efforts can be directed elsewhere. Your team needs to be very honest with themselves about whether, if all of the attention they are currently paying to the project is diverted elsewhere, will the performance continue to be sustained? If the answer is yes, well, then you're golden. But if you are depending on temporary resources and attention to make the change that will soon be going away, then you need to figure out a way to embed the improvement into the operations. As an analogy, improving performance in an organization is like pushing a ball up a hill. The uphill part is the organizational resistance to change. This is not just people not wanting to change, but more the fact that an organization just has a way of doing things that is natural for that organization. This is influenced by processes, systems, and culture, as well as individual skill and motivation. In a stable environment, the ball tends to stay in the same place. It can be changed, but however it is pushed, it tends to come right back to where it started. Now, you invest a lot of time, energy, and expense to pushing the ball up the hill. You are now able to reach new levels of performance. But if you want to sustain the improvement, your only options are to stand there and hold the ball or to give it up and let the ball roll back to where you started. Now, if you want to make sure that the performance doesn't go back to the way it was before, you're going to need to make fundamental changes in the organization. If you build in mechanisms that naturally push the ball back to the new normal, then you won't have to continue to expend the kind of energy it was required to make the change. The question is, what are those changes in the organization that will enable you to sustain the gains that you have made? Like we talked about in the reliability tutorial, those changes tend to be along the lines of focusing on individuals, procedures, and systems or infrastructures. As you build in mechanisms that make these changes permanent, the culture tends to change and help solidify the new way of doing things. So let's pause for a moment and scroll back to the beginning of the project. If you're using lean principles in your organization, then you already have active daily management processes in place to help solve problems on a daily basis. But if you already have a problem-solving process built into your daily management, then why did you put an improvement project together in the first place? Why didn't you just use active daily management? Well, most likely you found that the problem you were trying to solve required a more dedicated effort and a larger cross-disciplinary team to be successful. If it could have been solved quickly, you would have just solved it. So you put together a team to solve this large problem. So, in doing so, what really happened was that the leaders in the area that needed improvement said to the improvement team This is going to take more work than we have the time or resources to tackle in our active daily management processes. So we're handing it over to you on a temporary basis. Once you figure out how to solve it, let's reconvene and figure out how to embed it into our active daily management. In other words, the management team is temporarily handing it over to the improvement team. Presumably, of course, several individuals are on both teams. Then, when the improvement team has achieved its goals, it needs to be handed back to the management team. Just the improvement team need to now start talking to the managers and the frontline staff. So as you wrap up the improvement project, you may be faced with another challenge. Most likely, in order to make the project successful, you probably limited the project in scope. For example, you may have limited it to a certain location or a certain shift or just a few individuals. Now that you have developed an improvement project, you need to make sure this is in place throughout the department. We refer to this concept as spread, and it will be the topic of another tutorial. So, going back to the topic of sustaining the gains made. There is no single method to do this, but there are a few principles that can help. So, for one, you need to have continued measurement and reporting. A major driver in helping enable your success was that you knew what your performance was and you were measuring it and receiving feedback. You need to now make that happen on a consistent basis. You somehow need to measure your performance on an ongoing basis, whereas during the improvement project, we said not to worry too much about how you get the measurements, just go out and start measuring. And I think a lot of us, we just use tally sheets. But now we need to consider what is the cost of the measurement to the organization. Some measures can be obtained through automated means, like especially in radiology, so partner with your informatics and analytics colleagues to automate these measures. Other measures are more resistant to that, so you're going to need to audit. Someone is going to have protected time to do those audits. Now that you have reached a desirable level of performance, you won't have to audit as frequently, but you still need to make sure that they get done. You're going to have to make sure that the person auditing agrees with the evaluation of the person who established the measure in the first place. Now, a lot of people advocate the use of dashboards, and while they have their place, in general, their usefulness tends to be overrated. So, for example, let's say we have a process, and within the process materials and boxes, we need to know whether we are behind. So if the number of boxes gets too high, and we need help. So one solution might be to create an electronic dashboard to let everyone know how many boxes are stacked up. If it becomes too high, then we would expect people to come and help. But this is going to require someone to constantly measure and record the height of the boxes. It will also require someone to build and maintain the dashboard. And chances are, people will stop using it. So another strategy might be to just paint on the wall behind it at the level that corresponds with the number of boxes that signal that something should be done. That way, the thing that drives the work is the same visible signal that indicates what needs to be done. The second method is when you are choosing activities to sustain is focusing on higher levels of reliability. On our A3, we recommended that we assign each of the specific interventions we have used to achieve our improvements a level of reliability. Now is the time that these become critical. If we see that most of our improvements were achieved through a level 1 or 2 reliability strategies, we know that the improvements will be difficult to sustain. We need to either come up with more level 3 changes like system or infrastructure changes or cultural changes, or else we need to have mechanisms to monitor and support the lower level strategies. For example, if our method of ensuring appropriate positioning on imaging is to train individuals and provide feedback, then we need a program for training and feedback that will perpetuate forever. Otherwise, we will slip back to the old level of performance. As another example, if our method for optimizing CT radiation dose is based on embedded protocols rather than technologist education, then we can develop an automated system that can monitor the performance of the protocols rather than relying on the technologist to never make a mistake, which is a lower level of reliability. Okay, another method is to create mechanisms for enforcing standards at handoff points. So one way that Toyota embeds the standard work is to make sure that everyone knows the standard, and then to make sure that when a part is handed down the line, that both the person handing off the part and the person receiving the part knows how it's supposed to look and will call out if it doesn't look like it's supposed to. This turns people into frontline inspectors. Obviously, it needs to be done in a respectful manner, but when two people who are consistently interacting with each other are both confirming that standards are achieved, it constantly reinforces it. Another option is to create an and-on. At Toyota, if anyone sees a defect in a part, they are supposed to pull a cord that stops the line and bring the team leaders running to the place where the problem is to help solve the problem. Most see this as a method for empowering frontline workers to make sure quality is built in, and that's true. But the real power in the and-on is that it forces the organization to always have help ready when the frontline worker has a problem. As you hand this back to the management team, when workers run into this problem, there needs to be a mechanism that they can stop the line and call for help immediately. This means that the management team needs to make sure that help is always available. The last one is embedded checking on the new processes in a leader's standard work. As leaders go through their daily activities to check to make sure operations are functioning as they should also have standard work as part of their daily activities. Part of that standard work should be checking on the new processes surrounding the changes you have made, both to make sure the processes are being followed and that the outcomes are being achieved. Then, senior managers and leaders need to be checking on the frontline managers and leaders to make sure that they are checking. It needs to be clear who is assigned to be doing what and who should be in terms of role, not the individual. So, in summary, improvement work is difficult, but sustaining it can be even harder. So all the effort that you put into your improvement plan, you should put even more work into your sustain plan. Organizations are inherently resistant to change. So, to establish a new normal, we must have continued measures and reporting. We need to focus on higher levels of reliability for our sustain plans and solutions. We need to create mechanisms for enforcing standards at handoffs. We need to create an and-on or stop the line. And then we need to embed all of this into our leader standard work so there's somebody responsible for following up with it. And the last point I want to hit home is that active daily management helps us to highlight where our problems are, what problems need more resources. We then take that problem and put it to our improvement team to test and find the best methods for doing things. The improvement team then hands that ball back to active daily management to implement the new processes and sustain. It all works together and is a crucial element in the design of your organization to sustain your improvements. Thank you for watching. I'm Kandice Garcia, and this is a Radiology Improvement Team Education course at Stanford University.